Hi, I'm Howard Spence again, and I'm doing this podcast during Black History Month 2025. And this particular podcast also relates to the ongoing climate that we're now seeing throughout our country, where the federal government headed by Donald Trump is making a concerted effort to whitewash American history and to whitewash the very existence of various groups of people who are not white MAGA evangelical Christians right out of the American history books. They label all of these activities as uh, uh, something evil, and rather than explaining what they think they are outlawing or forbidding to be presented to our children, they call it DEI. But they don't bother to tell American viewers and uh, citizens that DEI stands for diversity, equity or equal opportunity, and inclusion. They instead turn DEI into a boogeyman, just like they have historically turned CRT, critical race theory, into a boogeyman, which is actually just a buzzword, synonym, or proxy in the minds of many conservative white Americans for something not like us. In other words, for people of color, for women, for members of the LBGTQ plus communities. You're not like us, and we are America, and we are American history. I recently put together a podcast dealing with that, but since we're still in Black History Month, and since I just got back from uh, going around the community, visiting organizations that are involved this morning in celebrating Black History Month and diversity, equity, and equal opportunity and inclusion, I'm motivated to look at a particular facet of activities in primarily the black community, which is ongoing and, in my view, very important, relating to an inclusive, diverse America, which is recognizing the existence of groups of people who are other than white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, Christian nationalist, MAGA, MAGA type people. And today when I went out, I stopped by two black fraternal or sorority organizations that are doing their own thing at this time in Black History Month to assure that we do not lose our roots, we do not lose our culture, we do not lose the understanding of what we as a community must do to continue to exist in an oppressive environment where we are not appreciated and where we have never been appreciated, in large part due to the existence and the shame of white people related to the peculiar institution, which is the fact that black people were brought here from Africa against their will, generally in slave ships to become slaves, to become property, chattel property, rather than to be people like indentured servants and some of the white quote unquote slaves that came here that were considered to be people. And so in this month of Black History and in this presentation, I'm going to look at ways that the black community has itself attempted to participate in the uplift or raising up of the descendants of black or Negro slaves in this country so that they too can have a part of the American dream of being somebody. And the two organizations that I visited today, I guess today is February 22nd, 2025, were a black sorority, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, and a black fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And by way of full disclosure, if it's not obvious to those who know me and who have listened to my prior podcast, I am a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and I have been affiliated with it since 1969 when I pledged Alpha Phi Alpha at Michigan State University here in East Lansing / Lansing, Michigan. But in any case, the events were both directed toward fundraising. Fundraising for what purpose? Fundraising for the purpose of generating scholarship dollars to be used among deserving, needing students in our community who supported the concepts of diversity, equity or equal opportunity, and inclusion. And I would add that looking at that particular concept, I have supported, my fraternity has supported, black fraternities generally have supported, and black sororities also, giving opportunities to those who are descendants of oppressed people to at least have an opportunity to uplift themselves and their children and to give them that hope for a better future. And so this morning, the first event that I went to, which was a fundraiser in terms of the fact that funds were being raised and distributed to deserving students, was Zeta Phi Beta sorority. And historically, over the past 6 or 7 years, the ladies of Zeta Phi Beta sorority have invited me to have the honor of participating as one of the judges in their annual oratorical contest. And this type of oratorical contest is very typical in the black communities in particular, rewarding students who show the motivation and the fortitude and initiative to try to improve themselves by going to post-secondary education of any type. While certainly the preference would be to go to an academic situation, that is by no means, especially in today's society here in America, the only way that one can uplift. And so scholarships from these oratorical contests also go to students of all genders and races who are interested in post-secondary training that will give them an opportunity to make an independent livelihood, hopefully without having to burden themselves with massive debt that is not cost effective. And I would note that historically W.E.B. Du Bois, who is an honorary member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, who lived primarily during the 19th century, but also was here after Alpha Phi Alpha was initiated in 1960 to help found the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He talked in terms of the talented 10th. In other words, the people who we are concerned with uplift for, certainly there are some in every group who have extraordinary skills and acumen and opportunity, but there are also, outside of that talented 10th, the majority of people who are average, typical, similar to some of the white people or students in the environment with them. But one of the characteristics distinguishing them is basically caste or place in society, or whether they are very poor or middle class or rich or whatever. So today's contest involving Zeta Phi Beta oratorical contest, I was very pleased during that judgment opportunity to help select 3 deserving young men from the greater Lansing area. Nizjai Davidson, that's Nizjai Davidson, Ezra Easterly, and Christian Pickens. And a very different group of students in terms of where they came from, where they were academically, and where they were hoping to go post-secondary education once they had graduated as seniors from some of the local school districts here in the greater Lansing area. And it so happened that this sorority this year gave their scholarships ranging from $1,300 down to, I think the lowest was $500 to these 3 men. And so, you know, typically we would have, at least from a sorority, someone who represented their gender. But this year that did not occur. But that's fine, because all of this investment is in our community as well as in individual people. And the topic for the oratorical contest was very timely and meaningful, and deserves, I think, a podcast in and of itself. The topic was, how could artificial intelligence, which a lot of people know now as AI, positively or negatively affect your education now and in the future? And each of these 3 gentlemen at this oratorical contest spoke to that particular topic, and it was enlightening. They approached it on different levels, of course, but I have to say that at least some of the information shared showed critical thinking, showed knowledge of facts, provided information that I found interesting and educational to me, although I have all the way back to 1969 been involved in academic efforts that resulted, I guess, as a proud Spartan in a total of 4 master's degrees and also a law degree from the University of Michigan Law School. But that said, this topic highlights the fact that our students who are graduating today will face a different academic environment, and they already are in their schools, which may or may not be positive in terms of how they develop their own critical thinking skills. They may become overly dependent on AI, letting a robot or a super memory type of apparatus retain all the information and just answer their questions. And of course there are issues and dangers there, which we also are seeing in almost all of the professions, including the legal profession. Since a robot or a computer can think a lot faster than most of us, certainly me, maybe we will become overly dependent on them. And since these robots or AI instruments seem to have the capability almost to teach themselves, there's this danger that needs to be looked at about, will they learn more than we know or could know? Would they become deceptive or rogue? A whole bunch of things. And the students today at the Zeta Phi Beta sorority oratorical contest educated me to let me know that even in some of the local high schools, this is starting to be used as a part of the instruction curriculum, and that sometimes they find, and their teachers find, that the information provided is inaccurate, either because the machine is not properly programmed, or because the machine does not have access to the correct factual information, a whole bunch of things. And a part of the problem is that there's this issue now of, if artificial intelligence is so powerful, what does a human being like you or me or these kids need to actually learn and retain? And I guess a rather crude version of it is that even today, when I want to know something, instead of going to an encyclopedia like Wikipedia or whatever, or relying on something I may have learned in high school 50, 60 years ago, I go to Google. Just, hey Google, and oops, there it was. Google took over my dictation. But and ask that question and get the answer and rely on it in almost an instant. And so some of the things I used to know or think I could do, I no longer do. I'm rusty because I've become lazy or reliant on this new wonderful tool. So this particular oratorical contest went well, and I'm going to not only mention it in this podcast, but probably also provide the audio as well as this video pod and on my computers and machines and social websites. Okay, continuing on, the second event I went to, which was sponsored by Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, was a fundraiser rather than an event at which scholarships or funds were being dispensed. The fraternity will itself have an opportunity in June at their annual scholarship banquet to have completed their own contests of local area students seeking to be sponsored or receive scholarships in some amounts from the fraternity's educational foundation. And I would just indicate that to my understanding, almost all of these it's my understanding that almost all of these institutions actually are 401c7 organizations, a special group. But the event today, a group of people turned a social Black History Month trivia session into a fundraiser. You pay to come in, you have a contest to almost like bingo, see who has the ability to quickly and accurately respond to trivia, have awards for the winners, and then the proceeds after expenses go into a kitty or pot to be used to help fund scholarship opportunities and support for students who are graduating from local schools. And so that was also an interesting opportunity for me. One thing that I would indicate is that in this era of whitewashing American history, of claiming, as does the present Supreme Court, that there is no racial discrimination any longer in the United States, the attack on being other than white, what we find is now there's even beginning to be challenges to the opportunities provided to organizations such as black fraternities and sororities to offer any kind of scholarship work or support to students that is based even indirectly or possibly on race, and this is or gender, and this is troubling because the reality is that there always are people in need, and to the extent that you set any criteria for helping students or other people in need, the present administration of the Trump DEI Gestapo force is that if it's there, then it's illegal and we will punish you. If we are not providing financial funding to support your scholarships or whatever, then we will also possibly prosecute you and try to take away your status as 401c7 organizations based upon the fact that you may be considered racist for having diversity, equity, and equal opportunity and inclusive considerations. And you know, the issue of race and gender and economics class, it's still alive. And in light of this onslaught we're seeing now against diversity or against black and colored people and women, it's hardly surprising that we're also starting to see lawsuits raised by groups that are proxies really for white supremacist racists or the Trump MAGA government seeking to force historically black colleges and universities to no longer even consider race in their admissions to some of their medical schools. And this is really a dangerous situation because whereas they could not go to white medical schools in the past, and then suddenly the Supreme Court says, no, even these white medical schools can't look at race when trying to determine who will be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. We suddenly find that as they turn from the white institutions that black people and women couldn't get into historically, now they want to say, and these institutions that we allowed you to have in the past so that you could at least have some black doctors, black lawyers, nurses, whatever, suddenly only the best qualified people can be admitted, whatever the best qualified people might be in their minds. But certainly in their minds, the best qualified people are almost never people of color and are almost never people who historically would have gone to school like Howard Law School or medical school or Meharry Medical School. And and so the result is, by proclaiming that America is a post-racist society, which is not true, and that there is no longer any discrimination, and you can't consider race, color, religion, any of that in terms of who you admit or put into your student body for diversity purposes, suddenly there is a potential that members of a large group such as the black community will no longer be able to find lawyers and doctors who look like them, that they might have an affinity for or a better rapport or based on historical experience from whom they might get more effective treatment. Black doctors often listen and understand what black patients say and don't disregard it in the way that many who are not black, whether they are white or Asian or Indian or whatever, listen and regard. And so what you're really doing is you're saying America is post-racial, and that means that if you are actually racial in any way, then you no longer are seen as anything other than another person. And any time that race or diversity or inclusion is considered, then you are discriminating. So it's basically turning the issue of who needs help and does America have any responsibility to help become a diverse country, a post-racial country for real in reality, or whatever. And so there you have it. You have my look and comments on two events I went today to visit relating to providing educational opportunities to people who are traditionally not able to benefit from what the American white community feels they deserve to have. And so I need not go further on that in this podcast, but I would say that although we're talking sororities and fraternities, there are two sides to that. There's the social side, and then there's the civic or community activism or uplift sides. And I have always been one less concerned with the social side of fraternities and sororities and other organizations in the community. I have been more concerned about the civic community activist and uplift of children. And so here we are in a post-racial society where suddenly race becomes even more glaringly out of joint with the interests of people of color. And in terms of how I generally see race and what it means and how it should be handled, I point to the fact that the times are changing, and there are indeed there are indeed people of color who are middle class or above, first, second, third generation blacks or women who have been able to go to professional schools. Let's say that their father was a lawyer, and so therefore they are almost legacy selections to a lot of the schools around the nation. It's not illegal to use legacy at this point in time, which simply means that if your dad gives went to my school and then turns around and gives $500 or $1,000 or $1 million, that you have a higher potential for being admitted than someone who would be the first person in their family to go to that school because you're poor and your father maybe didn't go to college, whatever. It's caste or class, as some people like to say. And so I have less problem saying that if there is diversity, equity and equal opportunity and inclusion, if you're not cutting it along the lines of race or gender, certainly it would seem that any affirmative action or extra points toward some benefit or admission should go to those who have not had the opportunity and could not make it on their own, but are just as bright or brighter in many instances. It's just that there's no spot for them at this point because there's no money in the bank to support their going. And it's a sore point with me. From time to time, I have found young people who have come to me, not related to me in any way, who have been in that class or caste situation. They're in a family and they can't get financing. They can't even get somebody to co-sign for them on a student loan so they can go to school for training, which once they get it, many times isn't cost effective in terms of what the cost of that student loan was. And I've been remarkably lucky, I guess, in retrospect, that several of the people that I chose to co-sign for or even invest my own personal funds in terms of helping them pay parts of their educational expense or provide a place for them to stay. Some of them have come back, been appreciative, and I feel like I've done something for the world, and it hasn't really skewered me. But and of course, there have been a couple that ended up being deadbeats. I didn't know them. They were poor. They may have come from single family homes. They did not have credit. And, I signed on the dotted line, much to my chagrin later, because they probably were not worth my investment in them, because I ended up losing money and I got stuck with their loans. So I said that to say this point, that at the end of what is now a, quote, post-racial, post-discrimination society, if that's the case, then we ought to at least change the bankruptcy laws, which the banks put into place mysteriously 2 or 3 decades ago, that for the first time made it impossible and illegal to discharge student loan debt. We hear a lot of noise these days about, I borrowed money, I went to school, I worked my butt off. Why should we have something called debt relief? Well, the truth of the matter is that that argument carries a lot more water when you hold up the possibility that if they can't handle a debt, you don't have to have debt forgiveness from a Department of Education or whatever outside of the bankruptcy laws. If the person was worth investing in the beginning, and for whatever circumstance, illness, the profession they ended up in was not cost effective, or the interest rates, which were actually usurious and cumulative of a captive borrowing audience, drove them to the point where they cannot afford to pay their bills. So treat them the way that you would want to be treated, and probably could have been treated, and maybe were treated. Let them have access to the same debt relief that you and other Americans have under Title VII or Title 11 of the bankruptcy laws. So those are the comments I wanted to make today. I know they kind of wandered around, but there are several topics and they're all related. And the point I'm making is that I encourage you, whether you are a member of a black fraternity, sorority, Jack and Jill, Masons, whatever, or for that matter, just good people who want to give back to the community, to do so. And to do so in a way that will leave a legacy for people who may never know your name. So with that, I appreciate your taking time to listen or to watch this old man ramble and share some thoughts with you. But the point I'm making is, we're not here forever. What are we leaving behind? Do our kids really need to have somebody leave $1 billion for them so that they can say that they are successful and better than other people? Or do they need to go to, for example, Harvard or Howard or some other university which is considered to be a university target of choice? Well, I don't know. At some point, it would seem to me that you may love somebody, you may feel that you are special and your kids are special, but at the same time, if you turn your back on your roots and where you came from, then you actually have no roots, and maybe you need to look in the mirror and figure out what is going on with you and why God chose you to be so special. Okay, well, have a great rest of the Black History Month, and I'll try to get this podcast out in 2 versions, one audio only on Spotify, and the other on my Blackgoldblogg page, which is black-gold.org, or on my YouTube minority ADR channel, which is at what is it? Minority cap A, cap D, cap R .2090. Okay, well, you take care, stay warm, and stay loved. Bye.